We interrupt this program for a special news bulletin.
Throws toward the corner of the end zone. It is intercepted! Intercepted! The Ducks have the ball!
To the end zone! Touchdown, Oregon! Mariota dives! Touchdown! They hand it off straight out! C.J. Verdell wins the game for Oregon!
Inside the 10! A hat-trick, a touchdown from Justin Herbert! Howard's going to run for it. Time runs out, and that'll do it! Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon! They storm the field at Autzen!
Welcome, Duck fans, to a bonus episode of the Ducks Rising podcast. On today's episode, I sit down with Penn State broadcaster and War Plus community manager Brian Tripp to preview this matchup between Oregon and Penn State and dive deep into how each team can come out of Happy Valley Saturday night with the win. Before we get started, just a reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Backer. We encourage all Oregon fans to check out their amazing Oregon jackets, hats, hoodies, and more at Backer. That's BCKR.com. Use the code RISINGFREE for 10% of all orders. Go back to Ducks Rising and free expedited shipping. Excited to be joined today by Brian Tripp, the Penn State broadcaster and War Plus community manager. Brian, week is finally here. Penn State versus Oregon. Excited to have you on.
A lot of hype, a lot of build up to this. And I think for both programs, right, Travis, we're thinking true measuring stick early in the season. I think it's probably too early in the landscape of college football to say a defining game, but certainly sets the narrative for both programs for weeks to come. And there's a lot of buzz here in Happy Valley. I'll tell you that. There's a lot of buzz and a lot of cautious optimism with what the team has, but then the uncertainty after playing those 3 non-conference games to start the year.
I think what's so interesting is we find ourselves kind of in a similar boat when it comes to these, 3 games for you guys, 4 games for us, of just like, we feel like we know some things, but there's also so many questions and unknowns and what was held back versus what have teams showed. So you kind of keyed on it a little bit ago, but where do you guys find yourself? Where's your head at going into this game in terms of, the fan base, yourselves, program?
Yeah, I think I'll take it back even to when the team came out of camp and then went into these first 3 games against Nevada, FIU, and Villanova, then a bye week last week heading in here to the Oregon game. And there's so many players that return, and you assume those are all known commodities. So then it's from a moving part side, losing a Tyler Warren to your offense, and really a lot of the offense designed to go through Warren and his versatility last year and the running game. I think Penn State, and James Franklin's talked about it, has really made an emphasis on what can you do with these first 3 games. Number one, to win. But while winning, figure out what you have and what is the identity of that offense going to be. And we'll get to the defensive side and Jim Knowles in a minute, but more offensively, it's personnel, right? 3 wide receivers that come in the transfer portal in Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross, and Kyron Hudson. And James Franklin has said it, Andy Kotelnicki has told me it. Their goal the first 3 weeks was to get them in a rhythm and develop the chemistry with Drew Aller. Aller was up and down over the first 3 games of the year. Looks like he's trying to do too much, trying to be too perfect. The guy, as we saw in last year's Big Ten championship game, which I think was one of the better games he's played, when he just lets it rip, he's got all the talent in the world. And I think there was an emphasis on the first game against Nevada. He took 1 or 2 hits using his legs, making sure that was an element of his game. Maybe he dialed back in weeks 2 and 3. So I think you're trying to find out what you have. And the running game the first week didn't get on track. And then with Katron Allen, even more so than Nicholas Singleton in weeks 2 and 3, they started to be more explosive in the run game. However, I don't think they truly had a continuity of what they want to do on offense and a rhythm, especially over 60 minutes. They haven't probably put together a full 60 minutes offensively all year. So it leaves you wondering, well, were they holding something back? Were they trying to do too much? And I think it's somewhere in the middle of that. I honestly do, that there's this personnel. You're trying to figure out what personnel you have, what are your best personnel packages, and what really the identity of that offense is going to be. Because they returned so much, all of their offensive line, where they're 5, 6, 7 deep, both backs, the quarterback, and the 3 receivers appear to be really good fits. I think then you hope that because they're so experienced that, okay, bright lights are on, big game, it's just going to happen. But you haven't seen it just happen over the first 3 games, so that's why there's a little doubt, I think, for Penn State fans. Then on the defensive side, you lose Abdul Carter, but Deni Dennis Sutton has played at an All-American level at defensive end over the first 3 games of the year. And you couple that with Zane Duran on the defensive line, and defensive line was a question coming into the year about depth. And some young guys, Chaz Coleman, 19, who I know Oregon fans are going to hear all about this week, getting a guy like Zariah Fisher back at defensive end, some of the guys that have played at D-tackle. That's no longer a question. I think it's Jim Knowles and his scheme. Now that they're going to be pressed really for the first time against an offense this year through 3 games, are they really where they need to be in learning that scheme and what they want to do to slow down Oregon? They've gotten great play at linebacker from Tony Rojas, and Amari Campbell has really stepped up. I think the secondary is as deep as any in the country, especially at the cornerback position. But again, you're still early in Knowles' tenure here. Will there be those communication breakdowns? And 1 or 2 breakdowns against Oregon, and all of a sudden it's 75 yards in the back of your end zone with their ability to make explosive plays. Franklin talked this week, and I know you probably heard this soundbite, that the difference between last year and this year is now they have some zone coverages, man coverages, a lot of different things in their tool belt that they feel like they can go to that Knowles brings to the table that Tom Allen didn't last year. And I think Clemson's start has certainly grown the attention of Penn State fans that saw Tom Allen depart. But I would say that's kind of where they're at, right? A lot of parts, a lot of returning parts. But until you see it in a game, you're wondering how much they've put out there. Have they put so much out there that they're still trying to learn what they are offensively and defensively? And really, until the game's played, we're probably not going to know that answer. We can guess what we think the answer is going to be. And that's why I would label it cautious optimism. And I think that's the same thing. Like Oregon, right? They've played at least some Power 4 opponents, but it's bottom barrel Power 4 opponents over the first 4 weeks.
Safe, I think, with the Gundy news coming out today. Safe to, it's hard to call them Power 4, but we'll take it. I think what's so interesting about this matchup is, I think, especially offensively, we find ourselves kind of answering some of those same questions you guys do. Mm-hmm. I think that there are lesser knowns when it comes to the guys we're trotting out, but at the same time, I think a lot of Oregon fans, including myself, are asking ourselves, like, how much of the offense have we shown? How much of some clunkiness we've seen over the last 2 weeks is due to holding things back versus, hey, we've got a bunch of guys who haven't proven themselves at this level. Like, they just need reps. And like, if we need our best stuff Saturday, shouldn't we be developing that and practicing that and put that out there? So I think those questions around, what's been on tape versus what's been held back have been, I feel like, big in both of our circles heading into this game. So it's going to be interesting to see going into Saturday, how different things look.
It's so funny you say that, though, because I'll tell you, like, the perception here at Penn State, and I don't know what the perception is of Penn State from an Oregon standpoint, but the perception here is you look at the stats, you look at the scores, and you look at all the newcomers and some of the big plays Oregon's put up offensively and what they've done at defensive end and linebacker. The perception here is I think every fan base is more critical of their own team and trying to find those warts and those flaws. The perception here is that Oregon's rolling coming into this, and Penn State hasn't gotten on track yet.
And I think what's the parallels I see, honestly, were us last year. And last season, we had a really clunky start, struggled with Idaho, struggled with Boise State. In a year where we returned like everyone, we had an offensive line that we knew, we had a quarterback that we thought was a known commodity in Dylan Gabriel. This is the year where we've really brought in new guys and just like been rotating, tons of guys at wide receiver, running back, our leading running back averaging 8 carries a game. So it's been interesting to see like how different of a vibe that's been 1 year to this year. But I think the question a lot in our circles right now is like, how deep are we going to go this Saturday versus some of these games so far? We've been 5-6 deep at running back in real moments within these games over the first 4 games. We've been, 4, 5, 6 deep at receiver. We've been rotating a ton on the defensive line and in the secondary. So that's my biggest question going into this game is like, hey, are we going to still run out, hockey unit line changes at all these different positions? Or is that just trying to figure out through these first 4 games, like, who are the best guys that we're going to trust when it comes to, this Saturday?
I'll give you this from a Penn State perspective in a bit, but when you look at what you've seen, because there are so many unknowns going into the year with Oregon and all the moving parts, what would you say strength offensively and defensively is through the first 4 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the versatility scheme offensively with Will Stein in his third year and with Dante Moore having spent a year in the system is definitely a big one. I think a lot of people went into this year with questions around Dante Moore, but I think for Oregon fans who understood what coming and sitting for a year did for him under Will Stein, I think that piece, just versatility of scheme, different ways to attack you, two really talented tight ends who can run and block, wide receivers who have stepped up, running backs who you got some speed, some power. So I think just the flexibility Stein can bring when it comes in the offense and how to attack different teams, especially within a certain possession. One thing that he's had a ton of success with at Oregon is running 12 personnel with Kenya Sadiq and Jamari Johnson, and you can catch teams in nickel where you can just bludgeon them to death on the ground, and then those guys can both split out and win matchups at receiver. So offensively, I definitely say that. And then defensively, the secondary has just been lights out this year, which is crazy to say because we've replaced all five guys back there, and we're starting two freshmen at DB who have been sticky all year, allowing very, very little, and then a couple safeties, including Dylan Thieneman, transfer from Purdue, who's been just the leader and the guy we've needed back there over the last couple of years at a spot that's been a weakness previously.
It's interesting to hear you say that, and that's an evaluation of the first couple of games. For Penn State, I kind of lean more on my notions and perceptions coming into the year because through the first three games, I'm not sure that they've proven some of their strengths that I still feel like are strengths of the team to be the true strength, especially offensively. But I would say it's still the running game with two running backs, Katron Allen, who gained probably at least a half step to a full step in his quickness and acceleration. Lost some weight during the off season. He's faster. He's running hard. He's always run hard, but he's coupled his hard physical running style with a little bit of burst and acceleration. I would say that behind the veteran offensive line, the last two games, while has it been perfect? No, but I'd still say that running game behind the veteran offensive line is truly the strength of the offense. Aller and the receivers have gotten into a nice rhythm. Luke Reynolds has really stepped up as a pass-catching tight end to complement Khalil Dinkins, who's more of the run block tight end. But I think when push comes to shove, this will still be an offense that's known for its physicality and ability to protect the football and not make the big mistakes that are going to put a team behind the eight ball. It's something they didn't do last year until that last play offensively against Notre Dame, make the big mistake. They were in every game for that reason. And then defensively, it's the two guys up front. Zane Durant, defensive tackle, who's played probably less reps than you'd expect over the first three games, but I think that will definitely change this week. And then Denai Dennis Sutton at defensive end, number 33, who's a game wrecker, off the end, relentless motor. And when you have two guys like that who are already excelling at such a high level and they've gotten the complementary play along that defensive front from a Chaz Coleman, Alonzo Ford, the list kind of goes on and on with that group. It's younger guys who have taken on bigger roles. I think that defensive front, which you knew you had two All-American candidates coming into the year, what they have around those two, plus how those two All-Americans have elevated their play, have really set the tone for what the defense can do.
I think what's interesting about those, and maybe tougher for Oregon fans or leading to some of the questions around Oregon fans as we kind of transition to weaknesses, is I think unfortunately for us, your strength, as you mentioned, kind of line up with some of the questions that Oregon has going into this game. So I think for us, it's twofold. It's offensively, can we run the ball? I think every game we've played in right now, we've been ahead of the chains. Dante Moore's been in situations where he's been, run past situations. We haven't been locked into 3rd and 8, 3rd and long, where our tackles, which are probably our biggest question offensively, need to hold up. So I think that's one going to this game for us. That's a huge key. Can we be ahead of the chains? Can we be in 3rd and 3, or is it going to be 3rd and 8? Because I think 3rd and 8, Isaiah World and Alex Harkey have been solid, but if there's one weakness for them, it's pass blocking. And I think when you combine with the fact, they neither has played in an environment like this is going to be, Dante hasn't been in an environment like this is going to be. I think that lines up to be a situation where if we're in long, 3rd and long all day, that's a tough spot for those to be in front of some of those edge guys you mentioned. And I think on the other side of the ball, we think back to the Penn State game last year, and while our offense obviously had a ton of success and thankfully bailed us out that game, and we were kind of caught on skates on defense. Our run defense really struggled. We struggled with your tempo. We struggled with some of the different looks you guys caught us in. So I think once again, Oregon fans feel confident if Drew Aller's in 3rd and 8, 3rd and long all day. But if you guys are catching us in scheme, if you guys are catching us with that run game with the two-headed monster back there, I think a lot of Oregon fans find themselves pretty worried.
And Penn State's done a better job the last 2 weeks of staying out of the 3rd and long. Their 3rd down numbers aren't particularly good. That's been, if you're talking about a weakness for Penn State, it actually is their 3rd down offense. They've been inefficient on 3rd downs, and it hasn't been the 3rd and longs. It's been for an offense that has that two-headed monster in the run game and a pass-catching tight end, and now Pena working out of the slot as a receiver. They have been good in like the 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 situations. Started to clean it up against Villanova, but there's a big difference going against Villanova than those DNs and linebackers that Oregon's going to trot out there in that secondary. So I would say for Penn State, the weakness offensively right now is just consistency. And that starts with the quarterback position and then carries over into that situational football. They were not good in the red zone in week 1, settling for a lot of field goals over the first 3 games against those opponents, and then not good on 3rd downs. And if you're not good on 3rd downs and you're not converting red zone opportunities to touchdowns in this league against an offense like Oregon, I think you're in for a world of trouble. And then on the defensive side, as well as they've played, will there be any, especially at the 2 safety spots? One, Zachy Wheatley's as good as there is, but the other, they've kind of rotated between 3 guys. Is that second safety spot, while there's a lot of talent, will it hold up and not have any communication breakdowns in this defense going against a passing offense? They haven't been tested by any offense passing yet. Nevada, FIU, Villanova, not passing offenses. What is that secondary and the communication going to look like in the secondary in this Noles defense against what appears to be, from the outside looking in, with more and more than that, a high-flying Oregon offense? I think that's an area that would concern Penn State as a weakness going into this game defensively on the back end.
How much, just back to that offensive point, how much tempo have you guys run so far offensively? Like, how, I know that was a big piece of that Big Ten title game, like Kotelnicki catching us in some looks. Do you guys expect a lot of tempo, or have you guys kind of not seen that as much through the first 3?
That's a great question. I've actually seen a lot of it the first 3 weeks. I think part of it is to help get that offense into a rhythm. A big thing that I know they've liked to do is to mix tempos. But I've been surprised with how much tempo they've gone. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, because I think the last 2 years under Kotelnicki, they've been at their best in that, like, it's such a cliche thing to say now, that middle 8. But when they're in their 2-minute offense, that's when Aller is in a rhythm. That's when he is at his best. You can tell that he's a 3-year starter. He's so smart and getting them lined up and getting into the right play. Like, I think some people view that as a knock sometimes. I'm not calling him a game manager by any stretch when you can throw the ball 60 yards on a line like he can. But I don't think he gets enough credit for what he does at the line. And I think in that 2-minute situations where he excels. So I think they'll use tempo when necessary to get that offense into a rhythm. And yeah, they definitely used it so far this year.
Well, that'll be an interesting piece too, because I mean, one of the big things that Lanning and Coach Stein have talked a ton about this week is like how well Dante Moore has commanded the offense and got us in checks and the right looks and everything. But it's obviously a different animal doing it at home or, at Northwestern than the Whiteout at Penn State. So that'll be another interesting piece of it, is like how dialed can we get communication wise to get us in those right looks. I think we're in the same situation where I think Stein likes to use tempo strategically. You'll see him catch team, but just as much as you'll see us snap the ball and run the play, we'll like check to the sideline and get us in the right look. So that's another piece, of playing on the road and playing in an environment like this. We feel like as Oregon fans, we had a huge advantage that won us some points against Ohio State last year. And I got to imagine you guys are feeling the same way heading into this one.
Yeah, I don't think there's a better environment in college football than this. And I can't wait to get out to Eugene. I've never been to Eugene. I'm sure a lot of Duck fans are feeling the same way about getting here this weekend to Happy Valley. And please pardon our construction at our stadium that's under renovation right now. But I'll tell you, they're closing in. It had been like one entire bowl on the west side, knocked the press box down and took the top half. It's a 3-year project. But now kind of encloses that side a little bit more. I don't think you'll have the visual aesthetic from what is now the broadcast side that maybe you had in the past. But noise level on the field, dare I say it might actually be a little noisier just because that side's a bit walled off. It's interesting you bring that up, though, about the environment. Like, we can talk all we want about the whiteout, and I think it's going to speak for itself for fans that come. Like, it's a special environment. It's a visual spectacle just to see that many people dressing in the same color. And I know there's going to be some green and yellow sprinkled in there as well. But how do you think Oregon, with a bit of a younger team, I think it's fair to say, and maybe a little less experience, how do you think they're equipped to handle what they're walking into, or at least the perception of what they're walking into on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those situations I mentioned with the, new offensive line, 4 out of 5 starters who are, new-ish this season and haven't quite played probably a game anywhere near this level. I mean, you got a quarterback who played in some tougher environments at Utah or some other place in the Pac-12, but this is a whole different animal. So I think there's kind of two pieces to it. There's the actual execution within the game, and then there's the, motivation, excitement kind of mindset going into it. I mean, if you've seen any of Coach Lanning's stuff going into Wisconsin and Michigan last year, I think he's definitely got the man in the arena stuff down, and I think Oregon fans are confident that this team will be excited, ready to go. Looking forward to that environment, embracing the challenge that it brings. I think the second piece of it, though, is how much does it affect your operation and the execution? I mean, you mentioned earlier, even when it comes to the defense, our secondary, 5 new guys back there who haven't played a ton together. You got 2 freshman DBs who never played in an environment anywhere near this. So I think we're super confident when it comes to, is our team going to be jazzed up and ready to go? Heck yeah. But am I expecting a perfectly clean operation? I mean, I think you'd be naive to expect that. So we'll see.
I feel like there's a similarity to that. Obviously not with the crowd noise, but on the Penn State side, the ability just to go out and play. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of hype, a lot of excitement coming off a deep run last year in the playoff, and understandably so. You have all this talent. You can't try to be too perfect all the time. And there's pressure, right? With all that's come back, and can they get over the big hump of beating an Oregon, beating an Ohio State, beating a Michigan? Even though they won a couple of playoff games last year, everyone knows who the opponents were in those games. That still is kind of that carrot dangling in front of the program, that one last hurdle to get over. So I think from a Penn State side, while you may have 110,000 people screaming in your favor in that stadium, knowing what this game is on your schedule, is it a do or die game? No, not in the current nature of the playoff format, and not with a trip to Columbus still on the schedule. And Indiana looks pretty darn good, and they're coming in here in November. But this sets the narrative for the rest of the year, because you don't win this game, assuming you get through UCLA, Northwestern, and Iowa before that trip to Columbus, all the talk is still Penn State, I guess this isn't going to be the year that they do it. So I think there's some pressure on them to go out and do it. And I think that can work obviously negatively against a team as well.
How much do you feel like the national narrative about Franklin is, can't win the big one, that type of conversation? Is that a sentiment felt by Penn State fans specifically, or do you think that's just a national media type of thing that gets discussed out there?
I think it's a really good question. I think those that are in the fan base certainly want to see that marquee win. And whether that's them winning a Big Ten championship, beating Ohio State in Columbus this year, going to a national championship game, or even winning the national championship, I would say there's still a segment of fans that feel like that's a requirement. I think those around the program and the real educated fans, they look at it, and you look at it as James Franklin, from where he came in to where they are. Obviously, you want to get over that hump at some point, but who else in college football would be as successful, as consistently successful, and deliver basically every single week? There's never a letdown. They don't lose games they're not supposed to lose. And that's really hard to achieve in this sport with this volatile age of players. So yeah, I think, look, it's something that's expected and wanted. It's a place like Penn State. You're always going to be expected to compete for a national championship, especially when you've been so close for so long here over the last, really, since 2016. So over the last 8 years, they've been in that place, in that picture, without getting over that final hurdle. But then if you really take a step back, I think the educated fans take a step back and say, all right, outside of maybe 3 or 4 other programs, who would you rather trade places with? And I don't think there's any program that's the answer right now. Like, look at what Clemson's going through right now at Dabo. So I think the educated, smart fans realize, okay, you've got one of the top 5 coaches in college football. There's just that so happens to be kind of this narrative that they're in complete control of the change, and he said that around them. But I think the real educated fans realize, all right, you can't do much better than what we've done without winning the national championship, and it's really hard to do.
Yeah, totally. So we'll kind of maybe end here for Franklin to get over the hump and finally, win that one. What are your like 1 to 2 keys to the game that you're like, if Penn State can do this, you feel like you guys are in a good spot?
Yeah, I think first, Aller has to play well. Ultimately, Aller has all the tools. I think he's dialed back the running. I think his ability, it's not like he's going to go out and beat teams on designed runs, but to move the pocket, step up, create plays with his legs. Saw it in the Big Ten Championship last year. When needed, take off and run. I think he's dialed that back. I think if Aller just goes out and plays well, they're going to be really, really difficult to beat. The receiving core is a major upgrade over last year's. They've got some guys that can make big plays, not to mention the tight ends and running backs in that passing game, the protection he's had all year. If he goes out and plays well, they'll be really difficult to beat. And then on the defensive side, I think it's still continuing to get pressure on that defensive line. And if Jim Knowles doesn't have to bring extra pressure from Tony Rojas or Amari Campbell, the linebackers, and you can use them to help in coverage. We've seen what tight ends can do against Penn State the last year with Fannin and what happened in the Big Ten Championship. If they can get pressure from their front 4, get Oregon in a couple negative plays, so they're in those 3rd and long situations with more against this crowd and this defense. I say those are the 2 things that really will dictate it for Penn State.
I think for us, the biggest key by far for us, I think, is just to start fast. I think anytime you go into the environment like this, we've had a couple other big games recently. The Ohio State game last year, the Pac-12 championship game 2 years ago, where we've just had a tendency in these big games, I think, to start a little bit slow. And you've heard different players just discuss like almost being too excited and ramped up for the environment. So I think obviously, given what you're coming into and given how excited this crowd will be and just like the entire community on your guys' end for this game, I think just coming out and moving the ball, starting fast, getting in the end zone early is a huge one that's being discussed a ton on our end. And I think just with that, I know personally, if I feel like we can outrush you guys, I think we're in a good spot, because I think that just dictates so much of what each offense looks like. I think it's shallow analysis, but whichever team's in 3rd and long, I think you put yourself in a tough situation in a game like this. So I know from our perspective, if we're ahead of the chains, we can stay multiple. We can, let Stein have the flexibility and variability to use the different pieces on offense. I feel like we're in a good spot, but should be excited. We're fired up.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I know you're coming in, and I hope everyone coming from Oregon has a great experience. It's what makes college football fun. There's no reason that this game should ever be played at a neutral site. I think that happens far too often in college football these days. So take it in, enjoy it, and hopefully the Penn State fans treat you well. It's funny to hear you say fast starts, because that's something Penn State struggled with as well, right? It seems so simple. It seems so cliche when you're breaking down a game. And you could point to every matchup in a big game like this. Both teams are talented at every single position. So do you pick DN? Do you pick corners against the receivers? Do you pick how do you slow down the tight ends, the quarterbacks? Ultimately, I think these games come down to 1 or 2 of the best players. Which players are going to make the big play in the game, or which team is going to make that critical mistake in any of the 3 phases. It's probably 1 play or 2 plays that decide a matchup like this in this environment.
Yep.
This is the first, might not be the last this year between these 2 teams.
That's the thing. We can go. Oregon fans find ourselves constantly going back to, every loss kind of besides that Ohio State game over the last few years. And it just comes down to winning those small moments, 3, 4 moments within a game. You analyze everything, you do your assignment 98% of the time, but you got that one moment that can swing a game. And I think obviously an environment like this and 2 teams that I think there are some unknowns out there, but I think we both feel confident that, we're playoff worthy teams that are going to come out and compete and show what they're about. So just excited to get out there, get excited to finally watch some I think the hardest thing with these first, 4 games and 3 for you guys is like, what do we have in this team? What's it going to look like going into this game? So that's the biggest piece for us, and just grateful to chat through it with you today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for hopping on.
Yep. Thanks, Brian.